The house was quiet at first, almost eerily so, but beneath the calm surface, tension had been simmering for weeks, months even. Every glance between Kody and his wives carried an unspoken weight, a tension that could erupt at any moment. And tonight, it would. Tonight, the words, "Give me the money," would become a war cry, a catalyst that would unleash years of unresolved emotions, secrets, and frustrations. Kody had returned home later than usual. The evening sun cast long shadows across the living room, highlighting the emptiness in the spaces where laughter used to fill the air. He stood at the doorway for a moment, his jaw tight, hands clenched, his eyes scanning the faces of the women he had once promised to cherish, now looking weary, wary, and distant. The house itself seemed to hold its breath. Money. It had always been a delicate subject, a silent line drawn between what was shared and what was withheld. Kody had tried to manage it all, to balance the complex financial needs of multiple households, multiple dreams, and multiple expectations. But tonight, that balance shattered. Robin had been cautious, careful to keep her frustration buried, but her eyes betrayed her. Christine had a small, barely visible sigh of exhaustion, while Mary looked as though she had long stopped believing any conversation could change anything. And Kody, standing tall but visibly tense, had reached the edge of his patience. The argument began not with words, but with a look, a glare sharp enough to cut through the air. The quiet in the room was a prelude, a pregnant pause before the storm. Then, finally, it erupted. "Give me the money!" Kody's voice thundered, echoing through the walls, shaking the fragile calm. The words were not just a request. They were an accusation, a demand, a challenge. Each syllable carried years of frustration, each letter heavy with anger. In that instant, the air seemed to thicken, charged with emotion. Robin flinched, memories flashing through her mind, arguments over bills, tension over priorities, the small betrayals that had slowly eroded trust. She had tried to reason, to negotiate, but Kody's demand was absolute, unyielding, a wall of force that left no room for compromise. Christine's eyes narrowed. She had long since learned that standing silent was both a shield and a weapon. Tonight, however, the shield cracked. The simmering resentment that had built over years threatened to spill, to ignite, to scorch everything in its path. Mary, usually the peacemaker, felt the storm closing in on her. She remembered nights spent comforting crying children, nights spent trying to patch broken hearts, only to face the same heated arguments, the same demands repeated endlessly. Her heart ached, heavy with the weight of impossible expectations. Kody's voice had not always been this way. There had been mornings of laughter, nights of quiet companionship, promises made under warm lamplight. But money had always been a wedge, small at first, then widening. Arguments over expenses, disagreements about lifestyle, subtle criticisms about priorities. They all converged silently into a boiling point. Robin remembered the first time money had caused a rift, how a simple request had turned into a heated argument that lasted hours. Christine remembered watching the same pattern repeat with children and household responsibilities. And Mary had learned that compromise often felt like surrender, that giving in too often left one exhausted, invisible. The years of tension crystallized tonight in those three words, "Give me the money." They were the match to the powder keg. The room vibrated with unspoken pain. The walls, adorned with family photos, seemed to watch, witnesses to a collapse that had been years in the making. Kody's stance was rigid, his eyes blazing with a mixture of authority and desperation. He wanted control, validation, a sense of power over a life that had grown increasingly complicated. Robin's face hardened, her mind racing. She remembered the sacrifices she had made, the compromises she had endured, and yet here he was, demanding more, as if the past, the effort, the patience, had never mattered. Christine's frustration was quieter but no less fierce. She had learned to survive within this system, to navigate its chaos, to maintain her dignity in silence. But silence could only last so long. The simmering tension in her chest was now a fire she could not ignore. Mary felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders, the echoes of countless arguments, the unseen tears, the private heartaches. She realized that this night would leave scars that no apology could erase. Kody's voice rose again, more demanding, more insistent. The room seemed to shrink under his intensity. He was no longer asking, he was commanding. The demand for money had become a symbol for much deeper issues: control, respect, power, and the eroding bonds of trust. Robin's chest tightened. She felt the anger rise, not just at the words, but at everything they represented. She thought of the children, the fragile unity of the family, the promises that now seemed hollow. Every demand, every fight, every harsh word had chipped away at the foundation. Christine's thoughts turned inward. She remembered the quiet moments before the fight, the fleeting hope that tonight might be different. But hope had long been a fragile thing in this household, easily crushed beneath the weight of repeated disappointment. Mary felt a wave of sorrow, a profound sadness for what had been lost and what could never be regained. She knew that no matter how this night ended, something fundamental had shifted irreversibly. The shouting subsided, but the silence that followed was heavier, more suffocating than before. Kody's breathing was deep, heavy, a mixture of exhaustion and lingering anger. The wives, each processing the moment in their own way, sat in stunned contemplation. Outside, the world continued its rhythm, unaware of the fracture inside that house. But inside, the fracture was deep, undeniable. Words had been said that could not be unsaid. Demands had been made that could not be ignored. Emotions had been unleashed that would take weeks, months, perhaps years to heal. This fight was not just about money. It was about respect, about recognition, about the silent battles fought every day within the confines of love, duty, and family. The money fight was merely the visible tip of an iceberg composed of hidden resentments, unspoken fears, and fractured loyalties. As the evening wore on, the house seemed to exhale, leaving a lingering tension in its rhythm, unaware of the fracture inside that house. But inside, the fracture was deep, undeniable. Words had been said that could not be unsaid. Demands had been made that could not be ignored. Emotions had been unleashed that would take weeks, months, perhaps years to heal. This fight was not just about money. It was about respect, about recognition, about the silent battles fought every day within the confines of love, duty, and family. The money fight was merely the visible tip of an iceberg composed of hidden resentments, unspoken fears, and fractured loyalties. As the evening wore on, the house seemed to exhale, leaving a lingering tension that settled into every corner. Kody retreated to a quiet room, the weight of his own choices pressing down on him. The wives, each in their own space, reflected on the tumultuous night, aware that reconciliation would not come easily. The emotional aftermath was complex. Love, once abundant, now mingled with anger, disappointment, and fear. Trust, once assumed, now felt fragile, conditional, and the future, once imagined with certainty, now seemed uncertain, fragile, and precarious. The give me the money fight would be remembered, not merely as a dispute over finances, but as a moment that revealed the fault lines of a family struggling to survive under the weight of its own complicated dynamics. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the rooms, reflecting the mood within. There was no clear resolution, no triumphant conclusion, only the quiet understanding that life, in its complexity, often offers no easy answers. Yet within that struggle, there remained a glimmer, a fragile hope that the family could find a path forward, that the bonds, though strained, might endure. But for now, the house was silent, filled with the echoes of anger, frustration, and the haunting words, "Give me the money." A simple phrase, yet one that carried the weight of years, the force of raw emotion, and the power to alter lives forever. The night would pass, the sun would rise, but the scars of this explosive fight would remain, etched into hearts, minds, and the very fabric of the family home.